She did everything right. Both hands on the wheel, engine off, window down, license and registration are ready. Elise Turner had pulled over on a quiet Georgia road like she'd been taught, like we've all been taught. Compliant, calm, no sudden moves. She wasn't speeding. No tail light out. No expired tags. The so-called routine traffic stop wasn't routine at all. It was the kind that black drivers know by heart. The type you pray doesn't turn deadly. The kind where you don't get to be innocent. You have to prove it. And even then, it might not save you. The first officer didn't ask for her ID. He didn't explain the stop. He just shouted, demanded, drew his weapon like it was a reflex. A second officer circled behind her SUV, fingers twitching by his holster. Elise stayed still, kept her voice low. She asked one question. "What's the reason for this stop, officer?" They didn't answer. They opened fire. One bullet tore through the driver's side window, missing her by inches. Another struck the headrest. And in that split second, the breath between life and death, Elise moved like no civilian should. Not because she was lucky, not because she was angry, but because she had once trained soldiers how to survive ambushes, because she had seen war and knew when it had come home. What the officers didn't know was that Elise Turner wasn't just another black woman on the side of the road. She was a decorated Army veteran, a survival tactics instructor, a registered gun owner, and the only reason she was still breathing was because she had learned long ago that silence wouldn't save her, that obedience wasn't armor, and that sometimes self-defense is the only defense left. In seconds, everything changed. The same men who had approached her with unchecked authority now lay stunned on the pavement, one clutching his leg, the other frozen mid-reach. They had called it a stop. She called it an unprovoked use of force. They had expected surrender. She gave them something else entirely. Resistance wrapped in restraint. Her shots didn't kill. They neutralized. She didn't escalate. She responded. The body cam footage, what little wasn't mysteriously corrupted, would later show a woman trying to de-escalate while being treated like a threat. This wasn't just a traffic stop gone wrong. It was a symptom of something deeper, something that's been ignored for too long: racial profiling, police misconduct, and the quiet assumption that some lives are easier to violate than others. But not this time. This time, the story didn't end with an apology from a podium or another name on a protest sign. It ended with a federal investigation, 2 suspended officers, and one woman who refused to become a statistic. Because sometimes the only way to survive is to be the storm they never saw coming. Elise Turner wasn't the kind of woman who drew attention in crowds. She kept her hair natural, her tone even, her steps measured. At 36, she lived alone in a modest brick home just outside Savannah, Georgia. With a dog named Bravo and a garden of tomatoes she never had time to harvest. By day, she taught emergency preparedness and personal defense at a local community college. Her students knew her as a patient, methodical instructor, someone who could break down the physics of situational awareness with the same clarity she brought to gun safety laws and civil liberties. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud. She was competent, sharp, quietly powerful. And if you'd ever sat in her classroom, you'd know Elise didn't believe in fear. She believed in preparation. Her past was no secret, but few pressed her about it. Most people only knew that she had served in the military. Fewer knew how deeply. Before returning home, Elise had completed 3 combat deployments with the Army, serving in both Afghanistan and Iraq. She had trained Joint Task Force units in hand-to-hand combat, vehicle ambush response, and live-fire hostage scenarios. She wasn't a soldier who took orders. She had written the manuals others were trained to follow. By the time she left service, she held the rank of captain, carried multiple commendations, and bore scars that didn't always show. But when Elise transitioned back into civilian life, she wasn't chasing status. She wanted peace and privacy. She'd seen the chaos of war, She didn't want to bring it home with her. So, she used her GI Bill to finish a master's degree in behavioral psychology and quietly took up teaching. What she didn't leave behind, however, was her commitment to preparedness and her understanding that rights mean nothing if you don't know how to protect them. Every semester, she opened her class with the same words. This course won't teach you how to fight. It'll teach you when not to, and what to do when the fight finds you anyway. She taught students of all backgrounds, but she always paid special attention to black women. They don't teach us to survive, she once told a colleague. They teach us to comply, and then blame us when that's not enough. Elise didn't say that with bitterness, she said it with conviction. For years, she'd quietly mentored a group of young women through a nonprofit focused on civil rights awareness and legal self-defense. She kept printouts of the Fourth Amendment in her glove box. She helped a friend navigate a traffic court hearing after a wrongful stop. She knew the law, she knew the loopholes, and she knew the deadly gap between the two. But lately, something had changed. Over the past 6 months, Elise had begun noticing patterns. Patrol cars idling too long outside her street, a marked increase in stops for drivers who looked like her. Local news reports that blurred over crucial details in use-of-force cases. In one incident, a teenage boy was tased during a routine stop, and the department declared the body cam footage unavailable due to technical failure. The town held a meeting. No reforms came. No consequences followed. Elise started seeing her students less interested in lectures and more afraid of the world outside the classroom. One student cried in her office after being pulled over for matching a description while walking home from work. Another, a Latina mom of 2, asked Elise if she should stop driving at night altogether, even though she worked the late shift at a hospital. Elise tried to reassure them, but deep down, she was losing faith too. Not in herself, but in a system that felt stacked and smug and armored against accountability. She didn't talk about it often, but she'd already had one unsettling encounter weeks before the shooting. While heading home from a faculty training event, she noticed a patrol car trailing her for over 5 miles, through 3 intersections and 2 gas stations. When she finally parked in her driveway, the cruiser paused just long enough to make its presence felt, then drove off without a word. She mentioned it to a neighbor who shrugged and said, "Probably just bored." But Elise didn't believe in coincidences, and bored men with badges didn't make her feel safe. That night, she checked her gun license again. Clean, valid. Georgia recognized her open carry rights. Her vehicle was insured. Registration current. Still, she cleaned her sidearm, double-checked the lockbox in her glove compartment, and went to bed uneasy. She wasn't paranoid, she was experienced. And she had every reason to be. Because Elise Turner understood something most civilians don't. When people with unchecked authority mistake control for justice, things go wrong, and when they go wrong, they go fast. What happened to her was not a random incident. It was part of a larger pattern, a systemic failure dressed in a uniform and handed a badge. It was the inevitable collision between power and presumption, between racial profiling and routine enforcement, between silence and survival. And in that split second on the side of that road, Elise wasn't thinking about politics or headlines or hashtags. She wasn't trying to prove a point. She was trying to stay alive. Because for black women like her, even doing everything right still isn't enough. It wasn't just Elise's instincts that had started to itch. It was the air around her. Something in the town had shifted. Conversations were more hushed. People looked over their shoulders more. She felt it when she walked past the local sheriff's office and saw the new patrol trucks, military style, unnecessarily armored. She felt it when she overheard a student mention being told to keep her tone respectful after asking an officer why she was being stopped. But it hit hardest when the community center canceled their Know Your Rights workshop due to scheduling concerns. Elise knew better. Someone had leaned on them. And the lean was getting heavier. 2 weeks before the shooting, a neighbor, a white man who worked in county records, warned Elise in private that her name had come up in a closed-door police briefing. He didn't have details, only that she was flagged as someone who frequently challenged protocol and could become an issue during field interactions. Elise thanked him, then locked her front door for the first time in years during the day. She didn't panic. She didn't run. She took notes. She started keeping her dash cam on 24/7, even when parked. She bought a new body cam and clipped it to the inside of her purse. She reviewed her own arrest records. None existed. She checked for warrants. Clean. Her vehicle? Registered in her name. No red flags. No reason to stop her. No reason to treat her as anything other than a private citizen exercising her constitutional rights. But in Elise's America, being correct didn't guarantee protection. It just made you a harder target to discredit, not harder to shoot. Then came the letter. No stamp, no return address. Slipped under her front door while she was at work. The envelope was white, unmarked. Inside was a single printed page. You teach people how to talk back. You teach them to resist. One day you'll push the wrong button, and there won't be time to teach anyone anything. Elise read it once, then twice, then burned it in her sink. She didn't call the police. She already knew what they'd say. Instead, she called an old friend, Jared Cole, now a senior policy analyst for the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. They'd served together in Kandahar. He was one of the few people who understood the kind of quiet Elise carried. When she told him about the letter, the increased patrols, the canceled workshops, and the flagged briefings, he listened without interruption. Then he said something that chilled her more than the threat itself. They're not watching you because you're dangerous, Elise. They're watching you because you're effective. Jared urged her to lie low. Take a break from teaching, even consider relocating. But Elise refused. Not out of stubbornness, but because she understood the stakes. If she stepped back now, she'd be confirming what they wanted to believe. That she could be intimidated. That knowledge could be silenced. That the line between lawful authority and abuse of power could be blurred as long as no one with credibility dared to shine a light on it. And Elise Turner had credibility. She didn't post on social media. She didn't film cops for likes. She didn't grandstand. What made her dangerous to the system wasn't volume, it was clarity. She educated, she prepared, she empowered. And most of all, she knew how to survive not just the stop, but the courtroom. The paper trail, the appeals. She'd testified as an expert witness before. Her name held weight. That's why they didn't confront her head-on. That's why they tried to undermine her by labeling her problematic, but the pressure was building. Just days before the incident, Elise had witnessed a stop outside the campus parking lot. 2 officers surrounded a young black student's car. One stood near the trunk, hand on his belt. The other leaned inside the driver's side window, voice low but firm. Elise couldn't hear the words, but she could read the posture. Intimidation. She walked toward them, phone in hand, not recording, just visible. The moment they saw her, they ended the stop. No citation, no warning, just a quick retreat, and the student, visibly shaken, drove off. Later that day, Elise found a sticky note on her windshield. Stay in your lane. She didn't know who left it, but she knew what it meant. And yet the most painful part wasn't the threats. It was the silence. The people who looked away. The faculty members who thanked her privately but said nothing publicly. The city officials who smiled during grant proposals but vanished when she brought up police accountability. There was pressure in being right in a world that was desperate to pretend nothing was wrong. Elise felt like she was carrying an invisible weight, one that got heavier each time another innocent face showed up on the news and another statement followed. It's under investigation. She started keeping a journal again, something she hadn't done since deployment. In it, she wrote names, not of enemies, but of people failed by the system. She wrote what they were doing before it happened. Where were they going? What they were wearing? What excuse was given? Then she wrote in bold black ink, Elise Turner, not today. But the signs were already there. That Tuesday evening, the day of the stop, Elise noticed a blacked-out cruiser idling by the gas station near her campus. She'd seen it before. Same unmarked plate, same silent engine. She'd asked dispatch once about vehicles like that, got a vague answer about interagency cooperation and task forces. She didn't buy it. It wasn't surveillance. It was a message. We see you, and the question that lingered wasn't if something would happen. It was when. Because for all her training, all her preparation, all her patience and restraint, Elise knew something America keeps teaching again and again. It's not enough to survive by the rules when the people who enforce them make their own. At exactly 6:47 p.m., Elise Turner was driving home from campus. She had finished her last class early and decided to avoid the freeway. She took the quieter back roads, routes lined with pine trees, scattered mailboxes, and long shadows from the sinking Georgia sun. She didn't speed. She didn't drift. Her seatbelt was fastened, phone untouched. And yet, as she slowed to a stop at a rural intersection, she caught the unmistakable glint of headlights pulling in behind her, tight, too close. She glanced in the rearview mirror. A patrol cruiser. No lights, no siren, just presence. She exhaled. Calm, collected. Then the red and blue strobe burst through her back window. She pulled over, right shoulder, full signal. Engine off. The dash cam blinking red. She rolled her window down halfway, hands visible. Everything by the book. She waited. The officer didn't approach immediately. Instead, he lingered in his car for 28 seconds, long enough to type something into his onboard terminal. When he finally stepped out, Elise noticed no clipboard, no ticket pad, just a firm hand resting too comfortably on his holstered sidearm. He didn't greet her, didn't ask for her license. Step out of the vehicle. Her voice was low. Officer, may I ask the reason for the stop? You fit a description. Step out. That phrase, you fit a description, it always carried weight. Heavy, vague, weaponized. Elise didn't argue. She repeated calmly, I'd like to comply. I just need to understand if I'm being detained. But he didn't answer. He raised his voice, hand now gripping the weapon. I said out now. Then, a second cruiser arrived. No sirens, just noise, dust rising. Two more officers emerged, one circling left, the other moving behind her passenger side. Elise could now see all three. Their formation, their posture. It wasn't a stop anymore. It was a containment. Elise slowly unbuckled her seatbelt. I am stepping out with no weapon in hand, she said aloud, for the dash cam, and maybe, she thought, for history. As she placed one foot outside the vehicle, a shot cracked. Not a warning, not a taser, a bullet. It hit the driver's mirror, exploded it, glass into her cheek. Reflex took over. She dropped low, pivoted between the open door and her seat, heart thundering in her chest. Another shot. This one punched into the headrest where her skull had been seconds ago. They were not trying to restrain her. They were trying to erase her. She moved with the clarity only years of war can teach. Elise reached into the center console where her state-certified locked carry case sat. Thumbprint opened. Sig Sauer P365 loaded, legal, hers. But she didn't fire blindly, didn't aim to kill. She remembered the trajectory, the sounds, the shouts, the angles. Through the open space of the shattered window, she took aim, not at heads, not at hearts, but at disabling targets. The first round hit the front tire of the lead cruiser. Pop, screech. The vehicle sagged. A second round struck the thigh of the officer to her left. Non-lethal, but it downed him instantly. He screamed, dropped his weapon. The other two scattered, taking cover behind their vehicles. In less than 4 seconds, Elise had neutralized two threats and destabilized their position. She stepped out, hands raised, gun dangling from her index finger, barrel pointed to the dirt. She stood in full view of their dash cams, bleeding from her face but unshaken. You opened fire on an unarmed woman during a traffic stop with no probable cause. This is being recorded. I will now place the firearm on the ground. And she did. Then she knelt. Not in surrender, not in shame, but in control. To preserve evidence, to stay alive. The two remaining officers barked at her to stay down. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Sirens wailed in the distance. Backup was coming. Elise breathed steadily, pulse tight behind her ribs. Because she knew. The worst wasn't over, it was just beginning. 3 more units rolled in. A total of 8 officers now surrounded her. Weapons drawn, body cams blinking. 2 of them rushed the injured officer into a patrol car. Another ordered everyone to back off. A supervisor had arrived, older, stern. He stared at Elise, not with confusion, not even with contempt, but recognition. He murmured something to a nearby officer, too low to hear, but Elise saw the man's face change, saw the color drain. She knew that face, the face of a man who just realized they had touched the wrong wire. The supervisor approached slowly. He looked at her hands, then at the firearm lying harmlessly in the dirt. He asked her name.
Elise Turner.
He froze. You're Captain Turner?
I was,
she said flatly. He turned to his men. Weapons down now, but not all obeyed. One officer, younger, too charged up on adrenaline and bias, kept his rifle trained. She shot a cop! We need to detain... The supervisor stepped between them. This woman is a federally licensed instructor, former military, lawfully carrying. She neutralized you after you opened fire first. She has rights. More than that, she knows how to defend them in court. The silence that followed was suffocating. And the body cam footage? Oh, it was rolling, recording everything, the shattered glass, the unanswered questions. The first bullet fired. The unarmed woman was kneeling with her firearm placed on the ground. The officer was bleeding from a leg wound, not a fatal shot. The tactical precision of someone who had been trained to preserve life even while under attack. This wasn't a suspect. This was a survivor. And the truth was now on tape, unfiltered, undeniable, and unerasable. The footage went viral before dawn. Not because Elise shared it. She didn't. She handed it over. Quietly. Legally. Her dash cam card. Her purse came. Her training records. All of it. Organized. Time-stamped. Unedited. It was her neighbor, a retired public defender, who leaked a portion to a journalist friend at the Atlanta Ledger. 24 seconds of raw, unambiguous truth. No commentary, no cuts. Just 3 officers initiating a stop, giving no clear cause, escalating without warning, and opening fire on a woman whose only threat was not being afraid of them. By the time sunrise hit Georgia soil, the internet had a new name trending. Elise Turner, the woman who knelt after they fired first. Not everyone knew her history yet, but they didn't need it. The facts were enough. She had complied, she had not resisted, and she had responded with control so precise it embarrassed every man in uniform that day. A headline from a national outlet read, "She didn't fire first, but she made sure she fired last." The response from local officials was predictable, slow, cagey, procedural. Pending internal review. Administrative leave. An unfortunate misunderstanding. But the video undercut every line they tried to feed the public. Worse, the leaked body cam footage, from the second officer's malfunctioning camera, mysteriously restored via forensic retrieval, showed something even more damning. One officer whispering, "She's got attitude. Let's check her for priors." Not a warrant, not a violation, just attitude. It wasn't a stop, it was a targeting. That's when Elise made her move, not with protests, not with press conferences, but with paper. She filed a civil rights lawsuit in federal court, citing wrongful use of deadly force, unlawful detainment, and racially motivated profiling. She named not only the officers involved, but the department, the sheriff's office, and the training supervisor responsible for failing to discipline aggressive behavior patterns already documented internally. Her attorney, Jared Cole, now flown in from D.C., filed a parallel complaint with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division under Title VI, demanding an immediate federal investigation into systemic violations within the department's stop-and-search practices. But Elise wasn't done. She submitted a motion to have the incident officially reclassified from assault on an officer to self-defense in response to excessive force. Attached was a legal analysis outlining how every round she fired adhered to Georgia's self-defense laws and mirrored the DOJ's own training guidelines for threat assessment. Every shot was aimed to stop, not to kill. Every movement calculated to preserve life, including the lives of the very men trying to erase hers. The motion included a timeline, every timestamp, every command, every silence. It painted a picture not just of a rogue moment, but a culture where silence among officers outweighed truth, where misconduct was met with protection, and where a black woman defending herself was framed as an act of aggression rather than survival. And then the twist came, not in a courtroom but in a boardroom. The sheriff, under pressure from the County Oversight Committee, resigned. Not publicly, quietly, but not before an anonymous whistleblower leaked his internal emails. Emails showing that Elise had been flagged in an unofficial watch list circulated among deputies, alongside other citizens considered potential agitators. No warrants, no charges, just names and descriptions. High risk during traffic interaction, one line read. That list violated multiple federal statutes, and Elise's name was at the top. Within 48 hours, the FBI opened an official probe. Elise was called in, not as a suspect, but as a consultant. Her military experience, her teaching background, her record of quiet leadership. It all came full circle. What they tried to use to discredit her now became her shield. She sat at the table, not across from investigators, but beside them. When one senior agent asked her, "Did you ever imagine you'd be helping us hold a police department accountable for trying to destroy you?" she simply said, "I didn't survive 3 wars to surrender in my own neighborhood." The officers involved were suspended indefinitely, stripped of their badge and weapon pending criminal review. One of them, Officer Laird, resigned, but his body cam footage showed clear violations of engagement protocol, and the district attorney announced possible felony charges for falsifying reports and use of deadly force against an unarmed civilian. The media tried to spin it in all directions. One anchor asked, "Do we want armed civilians deciding what counts as a threat?" But the real question that echoed across the country was far louder. Why are people like Elise being treated like threats to begin with? Elise didn't gloat. She didn't give viral interviews. She issued one statement through her lawyer. "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who sat quietly through a traffic stop and wondered if they'd survive. I didn't want to become the story, but I won't apologize for surviving it." Then she returned to teaching. Her next course was full within hours. She renamed it, "After the Stop: What Happens When Rights Collide with Power." Enrollment included college students, single moms, veterans, and 2 newly retired officers who said they'd never understood what their uniforms represented to others. Until now. Elise never wanted to be anyone's hero. She wasn't chasing headlines or court victories. She just wanted what every American citizen is promised, but not everyone receives: safety, dignity, the right to live without being hunted by the people sworn to protect you. But the truth is, Elise Turner became something more than a survivor. She became a symbol, not of vengeance, but of clarity. She didn't go viral because she fought back. She went viral because she did it right, because she stayed calm when bullets shattered glass, because she remembered the law when the law forgot her, because she knew her rights and never once let her rage override her judgment. That kind of strength, the quiet kind, doesn't come from hashtags. It comes from years of discipline, from buried scars, from watching the world fail people who look like you and choosing, still, to believe in something better. In the months that followed, her case led to more than courtroom fallout. It inspired a bill in Georgia's state legislature that would require mandatory civilian oversight review for any use-of-force incidents involving unarmed drivers. The proposed law, unofficially dubbed Elise's Clause, included tighter regulations on body cam footage retention, real-time GPS audit trails during stops, and criminal penalties for officers who deactivate cameras without cause. But Elise didn't show up for the bill signing. She was in a classroom. 12 students in folding chairs, each with a copy of their state's self-defense statutes, learning how to assert their rights without escalating fear. In that room, Elise wasn't a headline. She was a guide, a reminder that resilience isn't always loud, that surviving injustice doesn't mean you become bitter. It means you refuse to disappear. One student, a black teen who had recently been stopped walking home from basketball practice, raised his hand and asked, "What should I do if I'm scared they're going to shoot me even if I don't move?" Elise paused for a long moment before she answered. "Fear is real, but so is your value. The law is on your side, even when the badge forgets it. So stay calm, be clear, and remember your life matters more than their assumption." Elise doesn't call herself brave. She doesn't post victory speeches or wear her past like armor. But ask anyone who's seen that footage and they'll tell you she rewrote the story. In a world where too many names are remembered only after tragedy, Elise Turner is remembered for something else, for refusing to die quietly. And maybe that's the lesson. Maybe courage isn't always about drawing a weapon. Maybe it's knowing when not to. Maybe justice doesn't begin in a courtroom. It begins with someone who knows the law better than the ones holding the gun. And maybe the most powerful act a black woman can do in America is to survive without apologizing for it. Because what Elise did wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the right to live. And she did, on her terms. Still standing, still teaching, still here.